Hey, David Ravhoff here. I thought it'd be fun to just do a quick overview of how web applications or like web pages or the browser work. I know there's a lot of stuff that seems like magic, and we just kind of like take for granted how it all fits together. So this is intended as an overview really for anybody, but if you're somebody interested in building web pages or web applications or just programming in general, I think that this will be a really interesting video for you. I'm not going to dive into like engineering specifics other than to show you just the mechanics of what's happening when you're using a web page. But I thought it'd be fun to just use as an example Google. I think everybody's familiar with Google and how it works. So let me hide these for a second. And we're all familiar with Google. We've basically got some links up here at the top. We've got some links over here on the right. A little footer here with a bunch of links. And then, obviously we have our search menu here. And you can see there's like different pieces to this. There's suggestions, basically. And as we type, the things that show up in this list are going to change. And what I thought we could do here is just look at how this actually works. So on most browsers, you can do, sorry, I should show you what I did there. You can usually right click and do inspect. You may have to install the web developer tools to get this, but I think this is there by default now. And this is going to pull up all this crazy stuff that probably is not going to mean a whole lot to you, but I'm going to step through just quickly what the big pieces are. For now, we can ignore what's going on down here. So I'm just going to hide that. But basically what we have, let's see if I can load this on the side. That might be easier. Sorry, give me just a second. There we go, dock to the right. Yeah, I think this will be easier to understand. So just quickly, what we have here on the top right is all the markup for the page. So every web page consists of three things. It's going to have the markup, which is just basically the contents of the page. That's like going to be the text and the images and the forms and links and all that kind of stuff. It's going to have styling, which is going to control the general layout. It's going to control how things actually look, like whether they're a certain color, a certain size, and can control things like animation, for example. And then the other part is the JavaScript part, which is just any of the behavior changes, or if we need to call out and request information based off of something we've typed, that's going to be done through JavaScript. So anyway, in the top right here, we just have the markup, and you can see as I highlight different things here, we're gonna highlight different areas of the UI. So like that's where the image gets displayed. That's the navigation. There's probably something for the footer. Here's the footer. And you can, even if you know nothing about programming or whatever, you can do some cool stuff in here. Like if for whatever reason you didn't want to see the footer, you could just get rid of it. So if you right clicked on it, you could say delete, and there it's gone, just disappeared from the UI. So if you go to sites that have annoying ads or blockers or stuff like that, and you want to get them out of the way, well, this is a way to do that. You can just inspect the page and get rid of the junk that you don't want. So it's just a quick illustration of what the markup actually is. Now, some of these applications will try to like rebuild the pieces you removed, so it doesn't always work 100%. So that is the markup. The next thing I wanted to look at is just the styling. So I selected the logo here, and we can see just a little bit about it. I'm not going to go into too many details, but you can see here on the right, we can see like what the size of that is. So it's 500 pixels wide, 200 pixels tall. If we went over here, we could look at all the different styles that are applied to it. So it has an Arial font applied, for example. It's going to fill up. The maximum height and width it has is 100%. There's just a bunch of different things that are like styling that are going to show up here. And if you wanted, you could modify them by just typing stuff in here. We don't need to get into the details, but this is just the styling that gets applied to anything that's on the page. So we've covered markup and we've covered styling. We can't exactly look into the programming directly, but we can look at some things that are happening through the programming, which would be the JavaScript side, the third technology. So before we do that, it's helpful to think about what's happening. So with any kind of modern page or application, well, even without that, with a normal web page, it's going to load whatever's in your file for the web page. So that'd be like all the markup that we looked at. And then as you're making changes in the page, or even if, say you just have like images, it may have to go make a network request to get that image from somewhere else. It may not be like in the same location as the actual web page. And if that were the case, it would reach out and make these network requests to go load an image or to go load styles or to load JavaScript or whatever. And those are all going to show up here under network. And we don't have to get into the details too much. These are kind of specific ones. So I will try to close that a bit. But we can clear these out. And the thing that is interesting is for these dynamic behaviors like search, we're going to type something in and Google's going to try as fast as possible to like give us suggestions, right, based off of what we've typed. So I want to find where we're getting information back based off what I typed. And one of these, we should be seeing responses based off of what we typed. Okay, here we go. So here we've got a get, and anything that happens in a browser is that interacts with the server. It's kind of boiled down to just a few different types of commands. There's a get, which is just asking for information, and it shouldn't it doesn't matter. It's asking for information, so you should get some kind of response. There's post, which is saying, hey, here's some new information, totally new information, go do something with that. And then there's also like put, which is saying, here's some updated information, so go and do something with that. There's also patch and delete, but we don't need to get into those. But as I'm typing in more and more, you can see the search query here. So here it might be a little small, but it says search and then Q is equal D. That means the query is equal to D. As I typed in more information, it was sending off more of these GET requests. So here it has Q equal to DR. So now it's updating the list of suggestions over here. And now it's got what, droll, I don't know what that is, drive cycle, because I had problems with my car, drop down React component, Dropbox. So it's giving me results based off DR, and as I type in more and more, it's going to give me better and better results. So here's DRA, so that's going to give me drag and drop, Drake, and then finally I get C in here, and you can see it's the first thing it's going to give me is Dracula, and then Draco Malfoy, Draconian. But what's important about this is, and this is kind of how really any web-based application is going to work, or smartphone app or whatever, is as you're interacting with the UI, at some point it's going to reach out and ask for more information from a server somewhere. And it does that through this GET request. And these can look a little different. There's different ways to make them, but basically I'm making this GET request, and then the server is sending back a bunch of information. And what's going to happen is if you're building an application, you're going to be listening to see, if you got a good response, because you can either not get a response or get a whole bunch of different kinds of errors. And if you didn't get an error, you're going to get back data, which is in our case these auto suggestions. And then from this data, you're going to want to take all of these responses and update your UI with them. So here you can see when we were typing that our UI got updated with all these different results. And you'll notice they also have images related to them. so it's not just text. So what's probably happening is, if we just use Dracula as an example, here's our first hit, which is for Dracula. It looks like the match, it looks like this object here is probably like the match's data. So part of that data here is the name. Here you can see it's a novel by Bram Stoker, which we also see in the UI. And then the third thing here is probably the image that's showing up to the left of it. And we could manually, we could open that. I don't want to show it here because it's going to cause some the UI to jump around. But I think if we go through and we look at these requests, I think these are all of the related images that got loaded after the UI was updated. So yeah, there's Draco. There's the image for the next one. That's kind of interesting. I wonder where the actual Dracula image is. Is it further up? So this one may have been loaded off of like my earlier like 3-letter request or 3-letter input. So I didn't have to get it again. But this is kind of the essence of modern web applications. It's like you're interacting with a web page or a UI or whatever it is. When you need more information, it's going to make a network call in the background without like reloading the page or sending you to a new page. It's going to do it in place. This is kind of the whole like single page app experience that you hear about. And then when it gets that updated information, it's going to modify the UI, and it's just going to keep doing it. So, you know, if we make more changes here, it's going to give us different results. And then whenever we're actually ready, we could click on one of these things, and at that point, it's going to send us to probably a new page, or yeah, I don't think it's like part of the same single page app. And one thing you'll notice is that in these request here, there's a lot of them, right? Like there's dozens of them. And some of these are going to be things where the application's reaching out for resources like logos, you know, images, whatever. Some of them will be things like fonts. So this is loading fonts. And a lot of it is going to be tracking. So anyway, yeah, that's kind of a rough overview of how like web pages actually function, or web UIs actually function. You know, there's a lot more depth to how all those requests and responses work, and how you build an application around handling, you know, gigantic responses and responses with no data, or error responses, or whatever, unauthenticated requests. You know, there's a whole lot of complexity, but really that's all it comes down to is you're loading a web page, you're asking for resources, occasionally you're asking a server for some more information, and then, you know, updating your UI based off of whatever it tells you. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions or comments, leave those below. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more videos like this, hit subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.